We are back on the record. Mr. Wilson, would you continue with the direct examination of the Honorable Lee Harper Wilson, please? Mr. Wilson, you ready? Can you hear me, Mr. Wilson?
I don't know if they're on mute or not. I'm getting a message. I'm getting a message from the Office of Court Administration that my computer is about to restart.
I haven't got that message. Mr. Wilson, can you hear us? We can't hear you for some reason.
Now?
Now we can hear you.
Typical. I'm using a mic so that both of us can be heard, and I turned it off.
Better to have it turned off sometimes. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Wilson, I want to touch upon the hearing before the Commission of Judicial Conduct. At one point in the hearing, Chairman Schenck asked you about declaring a mistrial in the Lang case, and when Ms. Lang pled guilty in front of the jury. And why is it that you did not declare a mistrial at that point?
Number one, Mr. Pham would continue as her ineffective lawyer, and number two, the state can object to a motion for new trial.
So even if you had decided to declare a mistrial, there are things the state could have done in relation to that?
Yes.
Well, earlier, Mr. Robertson was asking you questions about certain admonishments not being required in misdemeanor criminal cases. As the judge of Harris County Criminal Court at Law number 10, do you still believe it's prudent to give admonishments to defendants pleading guilty, even if the Code of Criminal Procedure or the Court of Criminal Appeals doesn't require it?
Yes.
Why is that, Your Honor?
I want to ensure that each plea by the defendant is knowing, voluntary, and that the plea is proper.
No. Your Honor, did you run for re-election this year?
No.
Are you up for re-election this year?
No.
Why is it that you didn't run for re-election?
My wife had scheduled surgery, so I wanted to take care of her.
And is your wife doing okay now?
Yes, she's good. She's good.
And when will be your last day in office, Your Honor?
As a practical matter, it'll be November 30th of this year.
Doesn't your term end December 31st of 2022?
That's correct.
Well, why is it that you're saying as a practical matter, it'll be the last day of November?
Because we'll no longer be on the bench. There'll be a visiting judge in the month of December in Harris County Criminal Court at Law number 10.
And why is it that you're doing that?
Again, in anticipation of helping my wife after her surgery.
Your Honor, do you have any animosity towards Michael Pham?
No, he's a nice young man. He's never been mistreated in County Court 10.
Was there any bias towards Mr. Pham in your decision to set aside or reject Ms. Lang's guilty plea?
No.
Was there any reason for rejecting the guilty plea beyond you believing that she was receiving erroneous advice?
No.
Was there any reason for stating your intention to appoint a new lawyer for Ms. Pham aside from your opinions? I'm sorry, a new lawyer for Ms. Lang aside from your opinions about Mr. Pham's effectiveness?
The question's kind of messy. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, and that's on me. Was there any reason for stating your intention to appoint a new lawyer for Ms. Lang aside from Mr. Pham's ineffectiveness?
Any other reason?
Any other reason?
No.
No. The record, the clerk's record had admitted into evidence by the examiner, by the commission. In that record, it shows that Mr. Pham filed a motion to recuse you at 1:26 on the afternoon of August 14th, 2019. Did Mr. Pham ever bring that motion to recuse to your attention or ask for a hearing on it?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further at this time.
Redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor.
Actually, before we jump into that, Mr. Robertson, I'm so sorry to
No
interrupt you. I was scrambling to take myself off of mute. Judge Wilson, I do have a couple of questions for you. I heard earlier in your testimony that you're board certified in
Yes.
criminal law,
Yes.
and that wasn't something that I had recalled reading in the record here. So let's talk about your experience as a criminal practitioner. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came up and your experience practicing in the criminal law community?
And when I graduated law school, I intended to be a legal aid lawyer. Because I speak Spanish, I intended to attempt to help my community, the Spanish-speaking community. I was attached to the Gulf Coast Legal Aid Foundation. I was handling immigration matters for the Gulf Coast Legal Aid Foundation. And I was handling hearings, and I especially liked hearings where so-called naturalization hearings, where legal permanent residents could become citizens. In 1982, the federal government cut funding for a lot of funding for legal aid as far as immigration services. So what I was performing hearings, for example, 2/3 of the caseload were deportation hearings. The other part were naturalization hearings. So essentially, I lost funding for my job. I practiced immigration law privately for about 5 years. What I would do in the mornings, because I was Spanish speaker, I would go to the criminal courts because there was a need for defense lawyers who could speak Spanish. So I began having appointments from the criminal courts. And after some time, I preferred criminal law to immigration law. And then the remainder of my practice from 1987 on was devoted to criminal law. Additionally,
Were you exclusively criminal defense, or did you ever work for the state?
I never worked for the state. My only government job was when I was attached to Gulf Coast Legal Aid Foundation. Before assuming the bench, I also handled family law matters, and I also handled a collection for contractors. In Harris County, there is a lot of fraud against Spanish-speaking contractors who present their bill after completing the job and they don't get paid.
Thank you. I have one more question for you, and it has to do with section 1.13 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure. That section is entitled Waiver of Trial by Jury, but as I read section A, and I apologize that you may not have a copy in front of you right now, as I read section A, it requires, if the defendant is going to plead guilty, it requires the state to consent. Am I reading that right? As a board certified criminal lawyer, I'm asking your impression about that.
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Judge Watt.
Mr. Robertson, would you like to proceed with redirect?
Yes, ma'am. I was checking to make sure I was unmuted. Judge Wilson, you indicated that you thought that admonishments to a defendant who had decided to plead guilty were important. Did you admonish Ms. Lang?
No, because no, the short answer, no, I did not.
Okay. didn't inquire into her capacity, her mental capacity, none of the standard admonishments to someone who's pleading guilty to a felony.
No,
Okay. And do you understand, Judge, that a guilty plea admits all of the elements charged in the offense?
that's correct, but I could not question
Okay.
Ms. Lang regarding any communication she had with her lawyer. That would be protected by attorney-client privilege. That's why I was limited as to what I could do once she was attempting to plead guilty.
All right, Judge. And you understand that not only a defendant in a misdemeanor case can plead guilty herself, but her lawyer could do it for her. You know that?
Only in essentially traffic ticket cases in municipal court, not in county criminal courts.
Okay, let's do this. Ms. Thomas, if you'll bring up Article 27.14 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. Judge, can you see that?
Yes.
Read subsection A.
A plea of guilty or a plea of nolo contendere in a misdemeanor case may be made either by the defendant or his counsel in open court. In such a case, the defendant or his counsel may waive a jury, and the punishment may be assessed by the court either upon or without evidence at the discretion of the court.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
Just one question, Your Honor. With regard to whether or not you gave the admonishments to Ms. Lang, did you accept her guilty plea?
No,
Thank you. Nothing further.
Who's your next witness? May Mr. Wilson, Judge Wilson be excused?
So far as the commission is concerned, yes.
Okay, thank you. Who is your next witness?
Your Honor, we had designated Mr. Ian Justice to be a potential witness. Actually, the time being short and his contribution being slight, the commission doesn't intend to call him.
Do you intend to call anyone else?
No, ma'am, we rest.
Okay. Mr. Wilson?
Give me just a minute, Your Honor.
Yes.
I need you to move over so I can have my computer back, Your Honor. I apologize for you having to watch me play musical chairs. No other witnesses aside from Judge Wilson, and we rest, Your Honor.
Okay, so we have closing arguments. Mr. Cruz, can you please tell us how much time each party has left from their allotted time?
Yes, Your Honor. The commission has 36 minutes left, and Judge Thomas has an hour and 35 minutes of the 2 hours left.
Okay, I don't think you're going to use an hour, Mr. Wilson, but Mr. Robertson, please proceed with your closing argument.
Thank you. Justice Alvarez, Justice Watkins, and Justice Williams. I appreciate the opportunity of being able to present this case to you. I promise I won't use even 30 minutes as my closing.
You might, depending on what the questions are to you.
Well, there's that. Counsel and Judge Wilson, and may it please the court. Thank you again for your service in this matter and your attention here today. You know, the transition from being a regular lawyer to being a judge can be difficult. It's difficult as a judge to try to escape the impulse to fix things and to make them work the way a judge believes they should work or should have worked. But the most difficult part of a trial judge's job is to remain impartial and neutral and detached and fair all those moral goals that are embodied in our Constitution and our jurisprudence and are given structure by the canons of judicial conduct, our code of ethics as judges. Judges, particularly trial judges, have pretty well defined lanes of travel, those activities that are a judge's job, and others that belong to the advocates, that is, to the lawyers. What happened in this case, I would say, is a vision issue. Judge Wilson lost sight of his role in the courtroom. He lost sight of who was there to serve the defendant's best interests. He lost sight of who had the most information about the defendant's expectations and her needs and her desire. He lost sight of who knew the available defenses.
Mr. Robertson, may I interrupt you for just a second? Did
Certainly.
we lose Justice Williams?
The answer is, I don't know. Let me, yes, we did lose him.
Actually, it looks like we
You
did.
do. Okay, let's go ahead and stop. Mr. Cruz, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll go ahead and recess real briefly.
And
One
he
second.
did say, let's do it for 5 minutes, just come back in 5 minutes. We're going to try and find out what happened to him because he did tell us that he was
His computer.
given notice. Yeah, he was given notice that something was going to happen. So let's do that. Sorry about that. And you can start all over again, Mr. Robertson, for his.
Oh, God, no.